I appreciate the invitation. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to learn more about what everyone's working on. I'm going to be using this as a makeshift podium here. So I want to open with a quote that I gain a lot of inspiration from, especially when times get hard. And you're probably thinking, if this is Deep Tech Week, is he going to quote Vannevar Bush? Is he going to quote JFK and inspire us? No, I'm going to quote Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." So in a world grappling with enormous challenges, from climate change to resource scarcity, pandemics to global instability, it's easy to feel a sense of hopelessness. But when I look out at this room, at all of you, I see those helpers. You are the deep tech founders pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into inventing the future. You are the investors deploying capital into ventures that will fundamentally reshape our world for the better. I sometimes define deep tech as startups that face some kind of profound technical risk in order to unlock outsized economic returns. But I think a more aspirational definition would be startups whose products enlarge the pie for all of humanity. So I think my assignment as a speaker today is to tell the back in my day stories, because AI for science has changed so radically over the last 15 years that I've been in this field. So I can give you a bit of background on me for context. And you heard some of this in the intro. I was founding CEO and then CSO of Citrine Informatics, which is an early player in enterprise SaaS AI for the materials industry. I left Citrine in 2022 due to serious health problems, hence why I still wear a mask. I'm not out of the woods. Even though that was a very scary time in my life, it did give me some incredibly valuable gifts. Including the gift of perspective that I now have on life and work and meaning that frankly I lacked when I was in founder mode. So these days I do some consulting on AI in the physical world, which I know many of you are interested in, as well as deep tech founder coaching, which I find extremely rewarding given how important all the problems are that you're working on. Okay, so now it's story time as advertised. So let's rewind to what probably feels like the Stone Age, 2010. In 2010, I was a PhD student at Northwestern in Chris Wolverton's group. We had started doing high throughput density functional theory simulations of thousands of solids, which at the time we were very pleased with. Of course, that bar has moved a lot if you follow the research in the field. I went back and looked. It was October 2010 when I created a Google group called OQMD, the Open Quantum Materials Database, which is what we named the project. OQMD is still going strong in Chris's group at Northwestern to this day. And OQMD was my gateway into AI because I felt that surely there must be something more we can do with all of these examples of how physics works, right? That's what these databases are. I saw DFT as a physics calculator. So people at the time would typically search these high-throughput DFT databases for interesting materials that happened to fall through various filters that they applied. But I thought that these databases could be used to imagine entirely new materials. And we did some of the earlier work in the field showing that you could train AI surrogates for DFT that were quite performant, sort of surprisingly so. And now this has become standard practice, and I would say work in AI surrogates for DFT is one of the most exciting areas in AI for science right now. So when we founded Citrine Informatics in 2013, our vision was to fundamentally change how materials are discovered and developed across the entire materials industry. We saw a future where AI could dramatically accelerate this process, moving society beyond trial and error discovery to a rational design paradigm. However, at that time, 2013, the funding environment for scientific AI was very different than it is now. Back then, I would say deep tech investing in general was not fashionable. The term deep tech itself, I believe, was coined around 2014. YC didn't start taking what they call hard tech startups until a couple years later, 2016. And and if you look at Google search volume for deep tech and hard tech, that didn't really start to take off until 2021. So back in 2013, the VC industry was still sorting through the rubble of the clean tech implosion. Many of you might remember high-profile failures like Solyndra, the solar panel maker that raised hundreds of millions, both in private capital and in federal loan guarantees. So we, the taxpayers, foot the bill for that. And then, of course, it went bankrupt. So these failures cast a long shadow over the proto-deep tech startups that were emerging at the time, of which Citrine was one. So in the environment of 2013, when we started Citrine, in 2014, when we closed our seed round, most investors were simply not interested in a materials AI startup. We were told materials aren't investable. Too many companies have already tried and failed to accelerate materials discovery, and that at best, what we had on our hands was the lifestyle business. Like one investor actually told us, yeah, I could see you guys playing a lot of golf, if this really takes off, but it's not going to deliver returns for me. Some investors compared us to Symix and Intermolecular. This is another sort of Silicon Valley deep cut. These were companies that had worked on high throughput experimentation in materials even a decade or two before we started Citrine, but they had difficulty finding a scalable business model. So across all these conversations with VCs, the message was clear. Silicon Valley has been there and done that with materials, and they're not worth billions of dollars. Now, fortunately for my own journey and for the story, we were able to get a syndicate of forward-thinking investors behind the idea of SaaS AI for materials. But when we started selling software into the materials industry, into actual companies in the industry, we realized that building cool tech was just a small part of the story. So for example, we faced the huge challenge of culture change within this established industry. We had to convince material scientists and engineers who had relied on intuition and traditional methods for decades that AI could now be a powerful co-pilot for them. So that involved building trust, proving value with published results and case studies, and integrating these new workflows that we were proposing into existing R&D pipelines. And that was a long journey and is a journey that continues. So if we fast forward to today, we've seen what I could only describe as a seismic shift in the climate around deep tech. We now live in a world where tech giants like Meta are spending hundreds of millions of core hours of compute on DFT simulations of catalyst materials. Companies like Microsoft, DeepMind, even ByteDance are pouring resources into scientific AI. We've seen, of course, Jeff Hinton, Demis Hassabis win Nobel Prizes for their groundbreaking work. And I am very sure, if I go out on a limb and make a prediction here, that those researchers and their proteges and collaborators are absolutely gunning for more Nobel Prizes by applying AI to materials specifically. And we're seeing the same trend on the investment side, right? So same story. There was a recent report by BCG that said that deep tech is now up to about 20% of all VC. And that's a huge increase, more than 2x over the decade prior. And in Europe, it's even higher. We're seeing, Dunia is one example, where a lot of exciting deep tech companies out of Europe. The deep tech fraction there is around a third. So massive sea change in the climate here in the environment. So, and of course, this is great news for, I would say, society as a whole and everyone in this room. But it's also worth asking, okay, what changed? Part of it, of course, has been technological progress. the maturation of GPUs, the emergence of transformer architectures, increasing availability of scientific data. Those are all good developments. But frankly, it's also been a cultural shift. So investors now believe, there's a robust contingent of investors, many of whom are here, who now believe that driving fundamental innovation in the physical world is a compelling thesis that can indeed deliver venture returns. And that was just not a belief that existed broadly 10 to 15 years ago. The SF Deep Tech Week itself is just in its second iteration, right? So the fact that we're all here is a testament to this shift. I would argue that an event like this, if you had tried to do this 10 to 15 years ago, you would have heard a lot of crickets because you couldn't have filled a room like this to talk about these ideas. So we've come a long way, clearly. The tech is advancing rapidly. Investor appetite for this space or this collection of spaces is real. We now even have an entire ecosystem of deep tech-focused VC funds. Again, not something that existed when we started Citrine. But as we look ahead, I'm very interested in this question: how can we enable the creation of more successful deep tech businesses? So going beyond, ideas, science projects, even, startups, right? There are plenty of those. I'm talking about profitable businesses that grow and endure for decades and truly change the world. And that's what I believe is important to necessary to change the world. And, I'll give you my hot take. In my view, the main barrier to the creation of more scientific AI companies today isn't necessarily better algorithms or better data, although both of those are good things. It's actually the business model. How do you capture value in a way that aligns with the long development cycles and capital intensity of doing anything with atoms rather than just with electrons? How do you build a sustainable, scalable business that can bridge from fundamental scientific breakthroughs to commercial success? And ideally do that repeatably. These are the questions that we as a community of deep tech founders and investors need to tackle together. So if these ideas resonate with you and you're interested in exploring how we can build a more robust and successful deep tech ecosystem, please reach out. I'm glad to connect with you. Best way to do that is on LinkedIn. I'd love to discuss, so I'm always happy to do what I can to help the helpers. Looking forward to the rest of the session. Thanks again for the invitation, and thanks for your time.